poor girl was sent instead of her sister on a blind date. The Millionaire CEO didn't let her leave. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The soft hum of conversations and the gentle clinking of silverware filled the warm air of the elegant New York restaurant. Each table looked like a small stage, every plate a piece of art under golden light. Lila Tran stood outside for a long moment before daring to step in. The reflection in the glass door stared back at her, a young woman in a pale blue dress she had sewn herself, her hands trembling as she clutched a small purse. The dress was neat, but the seams showed a careful hand rather than wealth. Her sister Lena, always confident and polished, should have been the one here tonight. But when Lena's flight was delayed, she had begged, "Please, Lila, just go in my place. His name is Ethan Cole. Be polite, stay an hour, then leave. I will fix it later." Ari, so here she was, standing beneath chandeliers that shimmered like captured stars, heart pounding so loudly she could almost hear it over the quiet jazz. She whispered to herself, "Table 12, table 12," scanning the room until her gaze landed on a man sitting alone near the back. He wore a dark, tailored suit, his posture straight, his attention fixed on his phone. His hair was deep brown, slightly tousled, his jawline sharp under the amber light. "That must be him," she murmured, inhaling shakily. For one dizzy second, she thought about turning back, but the waiter had already noticed her. She walked toward the table, each step echoing her uncertainty. "Hi," she said softly, forcing a smile. "You must be Ethan. I am Lena. Nice to meet you." The man looked up, startled. His eyes were a cool gray, intelligent, and cautious. For a heartbeat, confusion flickered across his face. He had not expected anyone, but something about her nervous energy, earnest, unguarded, made him pause. A business associate had just canceled a dinner meeting. He had come anyway, to clear his head. And now this stranger stood before him, cheeks flushed, clutching her purse like a shield. He could have corrected her mistake right there. Yet, instead, he felt curiosity stirring. "Nice to meet you too," he said, his tone even, polite. Relief flooded her face. She sat down quickly, hands folding over the edge of the napkin as if anchoring herself. "Blind dates are so awkward, right?" She laughed a little too loudly. "My sister said you might be quiet, but that is all right. I can talk enough for both of us." He almost smiled. "So I have been told," he replied. They ordered water. She tried not to stare at the menu that had no prices. He noticed. "Do you come here often?" he asked. Lila shook her head. "No, I work nearby though. I am a seamstress. Small shop, mostly alterations. It pays the bills. Some of them anyway." He studied her face, honest, open, completely unaware of who he was. For once, someone looked at him without calculation. "That sounds like careful work," he said. She shrugged, fiddling with the corner of her napkin. "It is. I like making things fit. People feel different when clothes fit right." He nodded slowly, intrigued. There was something in her words, a quiet pride, a dignity that did not depend on money. Minutes drifted into laughter. She spoke about her mother's illness, her dream of owning a tiny design studio someday, and how New York could feel both cruel and kind in the same hour. Ethan listened, amused by her honesty. She misread his silence as shyness, which made her talk more. For the first time in months, he found himself forgetting the pressure of his name, his empire, his endless meetings. Then her phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a message. "Hey Lila, are you still coming? I am already at table 12. Looking forward to meeting you. Ethan Cole." Her smile froze. Slowly, her eyes lifted to the man across from her. "You are not Ethan, are you?" she whispered. He hesitated, then shook his head gently. "No, I am not." Color drained from her cheeks. "Oh my God," she gasped. Standing so fast, her chair scraped against the floor. "I am so sorry. I I must have. This is so embarrassing. Wait, he said, rising. But she was already backing away, clutching her purse. It is fine, she stammered. Really, please just forget this ever happened. And before he could say another word, she hurried out into the night, the door swinging shut behind her, leaving the faint scent of lavender and panic. Ethan stood there for a moment, staring at the empty chair. Then, to his own surprise, he smiled. Something about her had stirred a warmth he had not felt in a long time. Outside, Lila stepped into the cold air, her face burning with humiliation. "Nice going," she muttered under her breath. "You cannot even sit at the right table." But deep down, beneath the embarrassment, a strange feeling lingered: curiosity. About him, about that fleeting connection that felt too real to be a mistake. That night, rain brushed softly against the windows of a small apartment in the Bronx. The hum of the city outside was distant, fading beneath the quiet sighs of exhaustion. Lila sat cross-legged on the edge of her bed, her sketchbook open but untouched. The page in front of her was blank, just like her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the man she had accidentally met, the one she had mistaken for Ethan Cole. The stranger's calm gray eyes still lingered in her memory. She let out a groan and covered her face with her hands. "Brilliant job, Lila," she muttered. "You survived a blind date that was not even yours and embarrassed yourself in front of some poor guy who probably thinks you are insane." Her roommate Mia peeked through the doorway, holding 2 mugs of tea. "You are talking to yourself again," Mia said, setting one mug beside her. "That bad?" Lila lifted her head, cheeks flushed. "Worse. I sat at the wrong table, Mia. The wrong table. I had a full conversation with a stranger who let me talk for an entire hour before I realized it. But—" Mia blinked, then laughed. "At least tell me he was cute." Lila groaned again and threw a pillow at her. "He was not supposed to be anyone. I just wanted to get through the night for Lena." Mia sipped her tea, her smile softening. "So maybe it was not a total disaster. Maybe he did not mind. You said he was nice?" "He was," Lila admitted. "Quiet, but kind. It is just—" She stopped, glancing at her sketchbook. "None of this matters. I will never see him again." Oh. Across town, in a penthouse high above the skyline, the man she had met sat in silence by the window. The city glowed beneath him, a web of gold and shadow. Ethan Parker, the real name behind the mistaken encounter, ran a hand through his hair, still replaying her laughter. He had not intended to stay for dinner, but her nervous honesty had disarmed him. People usually watched his every move, careful and polite, their words chosen like coins. She, on the other hand, had spoken with warmth and complete sincerity. She had no idea who he was. For the first time in years, someone had looked at him without seeing money or reputation. Only a man across a table. The thought stayed with him longer than he expected. He closed his laptop, unable to focus on the numbers on the screen. It was strange, almost childish, but he found himself wishing he had asked for her real name before she fled. The following morning, Lila hurried through the narrow streets toward the small tailor shop where she worked. The air smelled faintly of fresh bread and bus fumes. The bell above the door chimed as she stepped inside. "Morning, sweetheart," called Mrs. Perez, the shop owner, hunched over a sewing machine. "You look like you saw a ghost." "Just a bad dinner," Lila said, forcing a smile. She hung her coat and sat at her station. The rhythm of stitching usually calmed her. Today, though, her hands trembled slightly as she threaded the needle. The hum of the machine filled the silence, and she tried to lose herself in the pattern of seams and fabric. A delivery man dropped off a box of materials at noon, and Lila helped sort through them. As she reached for a roll of fabric, something slipped from her pocket, her small sketchbook. It fell open to a page she had drawn the night before. A face, his face. She quickly closed it, cheeks burning. "New design?" Mrs. Perez teased from across the room. "Just a doodle," Lila said softly, slipping it away. That evening, after her shift ended, she walked home through the drizzle, clutching her umbrella against the wind. Her mind wandered back to the stranger's voice. The way he had listened, not with impatience, but genuine curiosity. A quiet smile crept across her face before she shook it off. Stop it, she whispered. He is gone. Yet destiny had a strange sense of humor. 2 days later, Lila ducked into a small corner cafe near her shop, escaping the cold. The air inside smelled of roasted coffee and vanilla. She ordered the cheapest drink on the menu and found a seat by the window. Pulling out her sketchbook, she began to draw a dress simple, soft lines, something elegant but within reach. The bell above the door jingled, and she barely looked up, until she heard a voice. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Her hand froze midline. Slowly, she looked up and there he was, the stranger from the restaurant, the man with the gray eyes. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then she blurted, hi. I am so sorry again about the other night." He smiled, calm and amused. "I was hoping I would run into you. You left before I could even ask your name." "It is Lila," she said quietly, embarrassed but oddly relieved. "And you are?" "Ethan," he replied, offering his hand. "Ethan Parker." She hesitated, then shook it. His palm was warm, his smile genuine. "Well, Ethan Parker," she said, trying to sound composed, "I owe you a proper apology, and maybe a cup of coffee." "Then I guess I should thank the wrong table," he said. For the first time in a long while, Lila laughed. The sound surprised her, and as they sat there, with the soft chatter of the cafe around them and the rain sliding down the window, it felt as if the world had decided that one small mistake might have been the best thing that ever happened. The next few weeks passed like quiet sunlight after a long storm. Every few days, Ethan stopped by the small cafe where they had met again. Always at the same table near the window. Sometimes he came with a book, sometimes with a quiet smile, and sometimes only with the excuse of being in the neighborhood. Lila grew used to his presence, though she still felt a flutter in her chest every time he entered. They talked about little things, the city's noise, her sketches, his vague mention of working in tech. He never said much about his job, and she never pressed. For her, it was enough that someone listened. One chilly afternoon, Lila sat sketching as Ethan arrived with 2 cups of coffee. "You always draw in that same notebook," he said, watching her pencil move. "Is that a habit, or something more?" She smiled, glancing down at the pages filled with half-finished designs. "It is kind of my diary. I sketch when I am nervous. It helps me make sense of things." He leaned closer. "May I see?" Lila hesitated, then nodded. Ethan flipped through the book slowly. On each page, he saw traces of her world fabric folds, women's dresses, notes scribbled in the margins. One page stopped him, a dress inspired by rainlight, delicate yet strong. He looked up. "These are good, Lila, really good." She flushed. "They are only dreams. I just fix zippers and hems for now." "Dreams are how everything starts," he said simply. His words sank deeper than she expected. No one had said that to her before. That night, she could not sleep. She stared at her sketches, his voice echoing in her mind. Days later, he showed up at the shop. The bell rang, and Lila looked up from her sewing machine to see him standing awkwardly by the door, holding a small paper bag. Mrs. Perez raised an eyebrow. "Your friend?" she asked with a teasing grin. Lila's face went red. "A customer," she whispered. Ethan smiled, stepping closer. "Actually, I wanted to ask if you could fix something for me." He handed her a men's jacket with a tear near the cuff. "It was my favorite one. I could not just throw it away." She examined the stitching, running her fingers along the fabric. "It will take a day or 2, he nodded. "Take your time. I trust your hands more than anyone else's." The words lingered long after he left. When she returned the jacket, freshly repaired and pressed, he looked at her with quiet admiration. "You make old things feel new again," he said. That evening, she found herself smiling at nothing while walking home. The winter wind bit through her coat, but she barely noticed. For once, the city seemed brighter. The next Saturday, they met at the small park near the river. He brought hot chocolate, she brought her sketchbook. They sat on a bench watching the sun dip behind the skyline, their breath turning to mist. "Do you ever wish you could start over?" she asked softly. Ethan turned to her. "Sometimes. But then I think maybe we are not supposed to start over. Maybe we are supposed to learn to begin again, exactly where we are." She looked at him, her eyes glimmering with quiet understanding. Neither of them realized it then, but that afternoon between laughter, sketches, and shared silence, something invisible took root. A thread of connection, fragile but real, was beginning to weave their worlds together. Later that night, when Lila opened her sketchbook, she found a small note tucked between the pages. In neat handwriting, it read, "For when you design your own brand someday, Ethan." Beneath the note was a fine pen, silver with a smooth grip, engraved with her initials. Lila pressed her hand over her heart. It was only a pen, but it felt like the start of a promise. Spring crept slowly into the city, washing the gray streets in soft light and early blooms. Lila's life began to follow a quiet rhythm. She worked during the day at the tailor shop, and on weekends she met Ethan at the same little cafe or at the park by the river. Each meeting seemed unplanned, but both of them knew they were waiting for it. He always listened more than he spoke. When she teased him about it, he only smiled and said, "Maybe I like learning about you more than talking about myself." She laughed, though sometimes she wondered who he really was. His clothes were simple but clearly expensive, his watch elegant, his manners careful. Yet he never spoke about family or friends or his work beyond saying, "I handle projects for a company." One rainy afternoon, Ethan offered to walk her home after she finished work. The narrow streets glistened, puddles reflecting the lights of passing cars. She clutched her umbrella, while he carried her heavy sewing machine, insisting she let him help. When they reached her building, a faded brick complex with creaking stairs, she hesitated. "It is not much," she said softly, embarrassed. He looked around the small apartment with quiet curiosity. The place was cramped but warm, filled with fabric, thread, and color. Her mother lay resting on a couch, her breathing shallow but peaceful. Lila introduced them quickly. "Mom, this is Ethan, a friend from the cafe." Her mother smiled faintly. "Any friend of Lila's is welcome here." Ethan knelt beside the couch and spoke gently to her mother, asking about her health, her favorite foods, her stories about the neighborhood. He listened as though she were the most important person in the room. Lila watched in silence, her chest tightening. No one had ever looked at her world with such respect. When he left that night, he paused by the door. "You are strong, Lila," he said. "You do not just survive. You make life beautiful. Even here." "Oh." After he was gone, her mother chuckled weakly. "He is different, that one. Be careful, my dear, but do not be afraid to believe that good men still exist." Lila pretended to focus on her sewing, though her eyes burned. The next morning, Ethan showed up again, this time with groceries and a new electric kettle. "The one in your kitchen was leaking," he explained. "You did not have to do this," she said, but he waved off her protest. "Let me help. It makes me feel useful." They spent the afternoon cooking together, laughing as she tried to teach him how to roll dumplings. He failed miserably, the dough sticking to his fingers. "I think I am better at eating than making them," he admitted. Her laughter filled the small kitchen, bright and genuine. For a few hours, it felt like the world outside did not exist. No bills, no worries, no secrets. But as night fell and he left, Lila's smile faded. She stood by the window, watching him walk away through the glow of streetlights. Something inside her whispered that this happiness was fragile, like thread stretched too thin. Back in his apartment, Ethan sat at his desk, the city's skyline reflected in the window. On the screen before him glowed a headline about his company's upcoming charity gala, an event that would gather New York's most powerful names. He rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of his double life pressing down. Lila saw him as a kind man with quiet eyes. But the world knew him as Ethan Parker, the chief executive officer of Parker Technologies. He had wanted to tell her the truth, but every time she smiled, he lost his courage. He whispered into the empty room, "Just a little longer. Let me have this just a little longer." The weeks that followed unfolded with a soft kind of joy neither of them dared to name. Ethan and Lila met often, sometimes at the cafe, sometimes at the Riverside Park, sometimes in the quiet of her apartment when her mother was resting. Their conversations stretched late into the evening, full of laughter, stories, and moments of stillness that said more than words could. One Sunday, Ethan surprised her by bringing tickets to a small art gallery across town. "I thought you might like this," he said. "They are featuring local designers this month." Lila hesitated, glancing at her worn shoes. I have never been to a gallery like that. I might not fit in. You belong anywhere beauty exists, he replied simply. The words melted her resistance. She went. Inside, the space shimmered with soft light and quiet music. Paintings and fabric designs lined the walls. Ethan watched her as she studied each piece, her eyes alive with admiration, her hands tracing the air as though stitching invisible lines. At one point, she turned to him and whispered, "Someday, I want to see my work hanging here, even just one dress." He smiled, tucking that sentence away in his memory. Afterward, they walked through Central Park as dusk deepened. The city lights blinked on, reflecting across the pond. She told him about her mother's worsening condition, about the bills piling up. He listened, saying little, but his heart clenched. He wanted to help, to ease her burden, but revealing who he was would shatter the fragile trust between them. A few nights later, Lila worked late at the shop. Mrs. Perez had gone home, leaving her alone with the sound of the sewing machine and the faint hum of rain outside. She was mending a client's gown when the doorbell chimed. Ethan stood there, soaked from the storm, holding a small takeout bag. "You forgot to eat again," he said, smiling softly. She shook her head in disbelief. "You walked here in the rain?" "I wanted to see you," he admitted. She laughed, shaking her head. "You are impossible." He handed her the food and leaned against the counter. "Maybe, but you look happiest when you forget to take care of yourself. Someone has to remind you." Her laughter faded into something quieter. She looked up at him, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. "Ethan," she whispered, "why are you always so kind to me?" He opened his mouth, but no answer came. He could not tell her the truth that he had fallen for her long before he should have, that every lie he kept was born out of fear she would disappear once she knew who he really was. "Instead," he said softly, "because you make me want to be better." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Lila stepped closer and touched his arm, her hand trembling. "You already are," she said. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, and rain tapped against the windows. He wanted to tell her everything right then, but he did not. Not yet. Later that night, when she closed the shop and walked home, she could still feel his warmth on her fingertips. Her heart ached in a way that frightened her, too real, too fast, too deep. At his penthouse, Ethan stood before the window, watching lightning scatter across the skyline. His reflection stared back, divided between the man she knew and the name the world worshipped. He whispered to the empty room, "If she ever finds out, will she still look at me the same way?" Down in the Bronx, Lila sat beside her sleeping mother, tracing her sketches under the dim lamp. For the first time, she added something new to the corner of the page, a man's silhouette, drawn in gentle lines beside her designs. She smiled faintly and whispered, "Maybe mistakes are just the universe's way of getting it right." Oh, the evening of the charity gala arrived with glittering lights and cold nerves. Ethan had tried to convince himself that inviting Lila had been a good idea, but as he looked at her stepping out of the cab in a simple pale dress she had designed herself, his chest tightened. She looked breathtaking, innocent, unaware of the world she was walking into. Lila held her small clutch nervously. "Are you sure I belong here?" she whispered. Ethan smiled, offering his arm. "You belong anywhere I am," he said quietly, though the words carried more truth than he meant to reveal. Inside, the ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers. Waiters in black suits moved gracefully between polished guests, the sound of violins floating through the air. Lila tried to blend in, but her heart thudded with every flash of a diamond or the distant laughter of someone in designer silk. Ethan guided her gently through the crowd, greeting people who nodded respectfully at him. "You seem to know everyone," she said with a small laugh, trying to ease her unease. "Business acquaintances?" he replied. "They are just people, Lila, no different from anyone else." But she noticed the way they spoke to him with caution, with admiration, with something close to reverence. She pushed the thought aside and followed him toward the grand staircase that led to the upper floor. At the center of the ballroom, the host took the stage, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight as we honor the achievements of Parker Technologies and its incredible founder, our guest of honor, Mr. Ethan Parker." The sound of applause burst across the room. Lila froze. Her gaze snapped to the man standing beside her. Ethan. The quiet man from the cafe. The kind stranger who fixed her kettle. Who held her mother's hand. Who told her she belonged anywhere beauty existed. Her voice came out barely a whisper. You are the founder? The chief executive officer? Ethan turned toward her, his face unreadable. The secret he had kept for so long hung between them like glass ready to shatter. Lila, I wanted to tell you, he began, but she took a step back. You lied to me, she said softly, her voice trembling. All this time. The applause continued around them, oblivious to the small heartbreak unfolding in the corner of the grand hall. Lila's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head, unable to stay, and turned before he could reach for her. She hurried through the corridors, past glittering mirrors and stunned waiters, until the cold night air hit her face. The city lights blurred through her tears. Behind her, Ethan called her name once, but she did not stop. Her heels clicked across the pavement until she reached the empty street. She leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. Everything suddenly made sense, the expensive watch, the elegant way he moved, the people who always seemed to know him. She had fallen in love with a man who lived in a world she could never touch. Back inside the ballroom, Ethan stood frozen as the host announced his name again. The camera lights flashed, and he forced himself to walk to the stage. He smiled for the crowd, but his eyes searched the doorway where she had disappeared. He accepted the award with steady hands, his voice calm, but his heart breaking. Success means nothing, he said into the microphone, his tone quiet yet sharp enough to cut through the applause. If you forget what makes you human. The crowd cheered again, thinking it was a clever line, but Ethan meant every word. Outside, Lila hailed a cab and sank into the back seat, her hands shaking. The driver asked, "Rough night?" She gave a small, broken laugh. "You have no idea." As the city blurred past, she pressed her forehead against the glass and whispered, "I thought he was different. Maybe that was my mistake." The cab disappeared into the rain, carrying her away from the ballroom, from Ethan, and from the fragile dream that had just shattered into silence. The rain had not stopped since the night of the gala. Days turned into a blur of gray skies and sleepless hours. Lila went to work, but her hands could no longer find the rhythm of the sewing machine. Every stitch reminded her of him, his quiet voice, his kindness, his lies. Mrs. Perez noticed her silence. "You look pale, sweetheart. Are you ill?" "I am fine," Lila replied, forcing a smile. But her eyes told another story. At home, her mother tried to cheer her up. Yet even her gentle words could not mend what had been broken. The sketches on Lila's desk remained unfinished, the silver pen untouched. She had once believed that a stranger's kindness could rewrite her life. Now she knew better. Across the city, Ethan sat in his glass office, staring at a report he could not read. The board of directors buzzed about new projects, about expansion, about record profits. He heard none of it. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her walking away through the rain. "Sir," his assistant said carefully, "the press is asking for a statement about the gala." Ethan looked up. "Tell them the company is fine," he said, his tone flat, "but do not schedule any more public appearances." That evening, when the office was empty, he walked to the window and looked down at the streets far below. For years, he had measured his worth by numbers, by deals, by the applause of people who never truly knew him. But Lila had seen him without any of that, and for the first time, he had wanted to be seen only as a man. He took out his phone and typed a message. "I am sorry, Lila. Please let me explain." Then he erased it. A man who lied once did not deserve to ask for forgiveness twice. Meanwhile, at the tailor shop, a rumor began to spread. Someone had seen Lila at the gala beside Ethan Parker, the Millionaire chief executive officer. A few whispers turned into gossip, and soon, one of the shop's clients canceled her order, saying she did not want scandals around her gown. Mrs. Perez confronted the source, but it was too late. The story had already reached local news blogs. Headlines read, "Unknown seamstress linked to Ethan Parker." Lila's heart sank when she saw it. The article twisted everything, calling her an opportunist, implying she had chased him for wealth. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, but no one wanted her side of the story. The next day, two men in suits arrived at the shop. They claimed to represent Parker Technologies. "We need Miss Tran to sign this statement," one said, sliding a paper across the counter. It claimed that her relationship with Ethan had been purely professional. Leela's hands trembled. "He sent you." The men exchanged looks. "We work for the company. That is all we can say." She signed it, tears blurring her vision. When they left, she tore off her apron and walked outside, the cold wind slicing through her. Back in his penthouse, Ethan discovered the memo hours later. He had never ordered it. Fury burned through him. "Who authorized this?" he demanded. His assistant looked terrified. "It came from the Public Relations Department, sir. They thought it was for your reputation." Ethan's voice turned to steel. "Fire whoever did this, and release a correction. She owes me nothing. I owe her everything." But the damage was done. Online comments multiplied by the hour. Lila deleted her social accounts and stopped answering her phone. That night, sitting by the window of her small apartment, she whispered to herself, "He took my name and turned it into a headline." In his office, Ethan whispered almost the same words. "I wanted to protect her. Instead, I destroyed her." Two people, in two different worlds, sat under the same gray sky, both lost, both broken, both wondering if honesty could ever undo the harm that lies had begun. Weeks passed before the storm of rumors began to fade, but the damage had already carved deep lines into Lila's life. The tailor shop lost clients, and Mrs. Perez had to cut her hours. Even the neighbors whispered when she passed. Yet every morning, Lila still rose early, brewed her mother's tea, and sat by the window with her sketchbook. The silver pen remained beside it, a reminder of everything she had lost, and everything she still believed in. One morning, Mrs. Perez knocked gently on her door. "You should not hide forever, sweetheart. Pain is only part of the story. The rest is what you choose to do with it." That night, Lila could not sleep. She stared at the half-finished designs scattered across her desk. The dresses were simple, made from scraps and imagination, but they felt alive, full of her hands, her hope, her truth. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Maybe I cannot fix the past, but I can still make something beautiful." Over the next weeks, she worked tirelessly. She taught sewing to women in the neighborhood, creating a small circle of makers in Mrs. Perez's back room. They called it the Patchwork Project. Word spread quietly, and soon local charities offered to help. For the first time in months, laughter filled the shop again. Meanwhile, Ethan refused to let his guilt be the final chapter. He uncovered the full story, the employee who had sent the false statement, the investors who had pushed the cover-up. At the next board meeting, he presented everything. "Integrity is not a strategy," he said. "It is the only thing that makes success worth anything." The room fell silent as he ended the contracts of everyone involved. Then he made a public announcement on live television. He looked directly into the camera, his voice steady. "Miss Lila Tran is a woman of honor and courage. She owes me no apology. If anything, I owe her one for my silence and for the hurt my name brought to hers." The clip spread quickly online. People began to see the story differently. Some criticized him, others praised him, but Lila avoided it all. She only kept working needle by needle, thread by thread, rebuilding her dignity. One rainy evening, she returned home to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was an invitation printed on heavy paper. The logo read, "Cole Foundation presents The Art of Lila Tran." Her breath caught. Beneath the title was a note written in familiar handwriting. "You once said you wanted to see your designs on a gallery wall. You deserve that and more. No lies this time, only truth. Please, come." For a long moment, she just stared at it, tears blurring her eyes. Then, slowly, she smiled. The next morning, she packed her sketchbook and the silver pen into her bag. It was time to stop running from her story and start walking toward the life she had fought to build. The night of the exhibition arrived, calm and golden. The gallery lights glowed against the windows, and the sign outside read, "The Art of Lila Tran." People in elegant coats drifted through the doors, admiring displays of hand-sewn gowns and sketches framed along the walls. Each design carried a piece of her story, courage, forgiveness, and rebirth stitched into every line. Lila stood quietly near the entrance, unsure whether she should step inside. Then she saw Mrs. Perez waving from across the room, her eyes shining with pride. Go on, sweetheart, she said softly. This is your night. Taking a deep breath, Lila walked in. She was no longer the timid woman who had stumbled into a restaurant by mistake. She had built something real, something that could not be taken by wealth or rumor. Guests stopped to shake her hand, praising her work, asking about her foundation for women in need. At the center of the gallery, she noticed one display different from the rest. It held a single sketch, her very first drawing from that long-ago night, and beside it the silver pen. Beneath the frame, a small plaque read, "For when you design your own brand someday." Her throat tightened. She turned, and there he was. Ethan stood a few steps away. No tuxedo, no bodyguards, no distance. Just the man she had known, the one who had listened, the one who had cared. He spoke softly. "You once told me you wanted to make people feel different when clothes fit right. You have done more than that, Lila. You have changed how people see kindness." Tears welled in her eyes. "You kept your promise," she said. He smiled. "And I am here to make another." From his pocket, he pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple gold ring, delicate and bright. "I do not have perfect words or perfect timing. I only have the truth. I love you. Not because you believed in me, but because you made me believe in myself." For a moment, the room faded away. She reached for his hand, her voice steady and warm. "We began with a mistake, Ethan. But this time, let us choose each other, for real." Applause rippled gently through the crowd as he slipped the ring on her finger. Under the soft light of her own gallery, surrounded by every dream she had ever drawn, Lila smiled through her tears. The past had begun with a wrong turn, but it had led her home to love, to justice, to joy. And in that quiet, perfect moment, she whispered, "Best mistake we ever made."